but my athletic achievements.
I was hoping actually you
Nobody wants to see that anymore.
Unfortunately, the speed was very important.
Yeah, yeah.
Should we, Nico? Should we? YouTube has it all, yeah? Yes, we go one more round with drinks and some bananas and we have some food later and then help yourself. Good? Good? Yeah, we check.
Just testing. Yeah, is this comfortable? As well in the back, you can hear us? Is it too loud?
No, sorry.
Bit too loud? Okay, then we will go a little bit lower with the mic. We just have to see when we get closer. Good evening. Welcome to Wolfi's Talks, and today a very special edition. Very exciting to have a real legend of the sport of triathlon with us. We go back about 17, 18 years when you came the first time. No, not the first time. You came the first time to the shop when the shop was much closer. We talked today, and I think the airline lost your luggage, and you needed to buy some shoes. And obviously, you were I don't want to say an unknown triathlete, but for me, an unknown triathlete, I was not aware about the sport as much. And then obviously, 2005, yeah, big victory in Hawaii. So really a big welcome to Faris Al-Sultan, world champion and European champion. Yes, please have a seat. We will have a lot of time to ask questions later, so we have the whole evening, and Faris will tell us about his story. I wrote down a few questions, but I think the story is amazing. I think he has a lot of things to tell us, but if you have anything, feel free to ask later. So Faris, welcome again to Dubai. Thanks for coming.
Thank you very much. I feel honored. Yes.
Just want to go back to the beginning. Where did it all start for you, and why the sport of triathlon?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for coming. I go right into the question, how did it all start? It all started more or less when I was 14 years old, and I was a bit chubby, a little bit overweight, and decided I have to lose weight. Hardly ate for about 6 weeks, and lost about 15 kilograms. And the fat was gone, unfortunately the muscle as well. And I decided I have to do something in order to eat normal again and gain back some of the muscle. And so the swimming club was looking for new talent. I was a bit old for that, but I decided to give it a shot and wanted to swim 3 times a week. But I ended up swimming 7 times a week after about 6 months, and doing 2 sessions per week in the gym and 2 sessions dry land exercises. So it was in full swing, competitive sports. It was obvious that I won't become a great swimmer because I was a bit too late. And then I looked for the new challenge. I decided I want to run a marathon. With 16, I ran my first marathon. And then I saw pictures of Ironman Hawaii and Thomas Hallerriegel, the first German winner of Ironman Hawaii. And that was it. I said, this is it. This is what I want to do. And I can't swim, I can't run, and now I buy a bike and figure out how to ride, and then I'm in. And that's how it started.
For those who are not aware, you come to the UAE since many years. So what's the connection with UAE, and where's Faris Al-Sultan, the name? How does this come along?
Yeah, the Arabic name comes from my dad. My dad is from Iraq, and left Iraq in 1958. He was one of the 20 best students and got a scholarship and decided to go to Germany and study chemistry. And he met my mom and stayed there. And but he has some local friends, and he was helping them when the first UAE locals came to Munich for medical treatment. And so he was translating for them, going to the doctors and all that kind of stuff. And so he visited the UAE regularly, and when I was 14, I was in the UAE for the first time on holiday. And when I decided to be a little bit more ambitious, in 1999, I decided to go here and exploit the good conditions, nice roads, perfect weather, and decided to train here.
Then in 2002, I think was the first time we opened the shop here, and then it was 2002 and 2003, maybe in the winter period, must be the first time when we met, when the shoes were gone missing in Alitalia.
And the shop was much smaller.
I was only myself and my wife and one mechanic, and then we have 2 triathletes came in, so I have no shoes, and so this is how the whole story started. But why Elaine, and what do you like about Elaine?
Well, Al-Ain didn't have so much crazy traffic, a lot of roads, and obviously the Jebel. That was the time before you had Jebel Jays for cycling, so it was only Jebel Hafid. And today, more or less by chance, we saw the guys from the UAE tour riding up there, and I have a lot of memories going up that little mountain. I think I rode up several hundred times in my career, and that was another major factor why I choose to go there.
There's some stories that you wrote from Elaine to Dubai, did a triathlon, rode back. So this is a normal training for you in your good days.
Before I retired and when I was still in shape, we did some crazy mileage, yeah. And I rode to Dubai the day before, did a little triathlon race the next day in the morning, and then after the triathlon race, rode back to LA. Yeah, that's true. That was happening.
Ironman takes a lot of training and preparation. How did you find your training in UAE when you were preparing for the races? So you came sometimes for the Friday morning ride. You were here with Patrick Lange. You were here with Pete Jacobs. You had the Abu Dhabi team. What was this all about?
Well, basically, I thought that this is cyclist paradise in LA, and you had those long roads where you could ride on the shoulder, great pavement, and you could do the miles pretty easy. You know, the weather was a certainty; you had never had to worry about that, and endless roads where you could ride, and not much traffic back in the day, and I had access to an apartment. Which I could use, and so everything was there that I needed, and so the connection was built, and I still to this day I'm very thankful to the UAE because it shaped me as an athlete, and later me and some of my friends, we wanted to found a triathlon team, and we approached the Abu Dhabi Tourism Authority for sponsorship, and they agreed. And that's why for 4 years we had that triathlon team up and running, and I think it was a quite successful one. If I consider the financial effort and the outcome. So there was another great episode of the triathlon story.
And then obviously the big win in 2005, your greatest result of your career, winning Ironman Hawaii. So how many times you started before you then won in Hawaii?
Let's see, I was 56, 27th, 7th, 3rd, and then I won, so it was my fifth race in Kona.
And then you had 10 years, I think you were top 10?
In total, I had 9 or 10, I think 9 top 10 results in Kona. But 4 times. It was the 10th place, so I barely made it.
What are the memories of 2005? What can you tell us about the event and winning?
Well, obviously it was the greatest race of my career. I mean, I had other races where I probably that felt on a personal level more satisfying, and were probably sometimes harder to do, to achieve. But of course, I mean, it's the race of the races, and what else can you do? I mean, so this was the race, and my memories from the race are still what's still quite vivid in my memory is the swim. We were 3 guys: Simon Lessing, very famous short course triathlete from South Africa, and Japanese short course athlete. And I remember when we went around the turnboat, the Japanese guy was leading up to there all the time, and I wanted to go up front to support him. You know, I mean, the poor guy was working for about 2 kilometers, so I slipped out of the draft and wanted to go in front, and I was like, oh no, can't do that. So immediately went back to the feet. Good guy, you're by yourself. I can't help you. And so he was leading the whole way, and then, but you know, he wasn't up for the challenge yet, and wasn't ready. So I dropped him pretty soon and led the race for a while. Then Danish triathlete Faris Al-Sultan passed me, and it was a hot day. And Torbjörn, being a rather heavy Danish guy, had issues with the heat. Already back at that time, he was experimenting with the thermometer capsules that he could swallow, and he had a plastic glove where he put in ice cubes to cool himself, which I didn't know, and I hadn't realized that he was wearing that. So, and it was a very hot day. So about 7 kilometers into the run, I passed him, and I said, "Torbjörn, pretty hot day today, isn't it?" And he must have thought, "You idiot." And I didn't meant to torture him, but he must have felt it that way. And yeah, so I passed him. I was in the lead, and once I reached the first turning point on the run, I had about 3 minutes, and I thought that won't be enough, because I mean, Peter Reed was chasing me and Cam Brown, and but my idea was, okay, I make it as hard as I possibly can for those guys, and that's what I did, and they never caught me. So yeah, pretty happy. And and on the last final kilometers, I had about a 5-minute lead, but I was full of paranoia because Thomas Hellriegel, the first German winner, was twice overtaken at kilometer 39. So I turned around about every 15 meters just to check if somebody's coming, and I never was sure that I actually make it until I saw the finish line tube, and once I finally crossed it, of course I was very happy and relieved, but I have no remembrance whatsoever of my actual crossing the line at maybe the first 1 to 2 hours after crossing the finish line.
Amazing. 2005, I really
I think a very important question obviously is, where is the Ironman tattoo on your body? Is there where obviously you need an Ironman tattoo when you win the Ironman. What is the story about the Ironman tattoo?
I have no tattoos nowhere, and no, it's probably I'm not a big fan enough to put the tattoo on me.
Okay, what do you think about the changes in the sport now that nobody races in speedos anymore? They wear proper clothing, cover their body. Is this something you feel is not the right way in triathlon?
Unfortunately, it's necessary.
Okay.
I mean, many people are curious why the times become so much faster in the last couple of years, and the answer is the clothing. We had fairly good bikes back in the day. I don't think that There was so much development on the wheels, for example. But the clothing is something that has really changed the game. And if you look at the wattage that the best athletes put out nowadays, it's not much different, and probably even less than what Norman Stadler was pushing. But the clothing is a huge factor. And late in my career, I tested on the track my usual attire of Speedo and the very short top, and against just a Castelli sleeved top, and it had a difference of about 12 watt. So you can imagine wearing a full body suit that is flawless. You know, it's just so huge that you don't have any chance anymore.
So that's my next question. What advice would you give young Faris? What advice would you give to young Faris? And now looking back at your career, what would you have done different? Is there anything you would have said you should have changed to be more successful, or any tips you would give your young self?
Well, of course. I mean, the sport has changed so much, and although many things what we can scientifically explain today, we did instinctively or by chance we did right. But of course there are some things that I've done wrong. And one thing, for example, in the gym, I hardly trained legs, mainly upper body. I wish I would have done more squatting instead of bench press. That would have helped. And also, you know, you have to, if you want to perform on the highest level, you have to nurture your speed qualities. And I was very endurance driven, and sometimes neglected the importance of the quality that you have to put in, not so much because of the physiology behind it, but because of all the being able to move fast from motorical with your speed skills, that I would have done differently for sure.
Okay, you trained obviously top athletes like Patrick Lange for 2 years, and now you're the coach of the German national team ITU, and you're here with your team next week in Abu Dhabi. So maybe an interesting event for you to join as well, to see, because there's some really top athletes there. So what did you learn from going from long distance to short distance? What advice can you give to athletes?
Well, of course, some of the things are basically the same, because it's whether you do a 1 hour race, a 2 hour race, even a 20-minute race, or an 8 hour race, it's still an endurance race. So all your aerobic capacity has to be trained well. And if you look at the top short course athletes, the top short course athletes are good at short distance, at sprint distance, and at the relay distance. So they're simply good athletes. And if you look at the mileage, the volume that some of the Norwegians put out, I mean, this is just crazy, and they are not so, they just have to shift a little bit, and then they would be long course athletes. So the main focus is still on the endurance, because it's an endurance sport. But that said, obviously, even in short course, it's even more important to stress all that speed skills that you have, and there, obviously, it also comes down to a physiological component that has to be there. You have to be able to use that physiological glycolytic engine to go hard, to survive attacks, and all that. So to train a world-class short course athlete is more difficult than a long course athlete, because with a long course athlete it's rather simple. You know exactly what you have to do.
Very good. Now you're standing on the sideline, and supposed to be on the racing itself. How is it when you come to an event and you stand now as a coach on the side of your athletes? You feel tempted again to start, or you're happy that you don't have to go through the training again? You're now father of 2. So how has life changed after being a top athlete and now being the coach for the national team?
Well, of course, life has changed, and of course, I still love to work out and do stuff. I think I hardly love anything more than that. But I know that I wouldn't be able to perform anywhere close to what I was able to, and it would no longer be satisfying. So I'm totally happy with standing on the side and watching the guys and trying to get them to do the best of what they can, and instead of doing it myself. I still enjoy, of course, cycling, swimming, and running, and going to the gym, being active, but now it's more or less for fun, and I do the occasional race, but not a triathlon race. I mean, I'm totally retired from that.
With your racing and coaching experience, what do you believe is the biggest things you would give as a tip, and what are the biggest mistakes athletes are doing during racing and training?
Oh, well, first of all, for an age group athlete, the best advice that I would give is enjoy the shit. You're not getting paid for it, so it's sometimes, you feel like there's so much stress. I mean, the sport is supposed to make your life better and not more miserable. And if you stress yourself all the time, then better you get paid for it, because it doesn't make any sense to me. And be relaxed, have fun, enjoy it, and as I said, it is supposed to make your life better, not worse. For the biggest mistakes, usually it's often the pace is too high in training, or the pace is too low. That's also happening. Usually men tend to have the pace is too high, women it's more like the pace is too low. With the age group athletes, not of course, it's not true for everyone, but so general direction goes into that way, and very monotonous training, no varieties in training, and the specialty is the cycling. For the age group guys, they go with 32.8 kilometers on average during a training ride, and at racing they have 33.2. So yeah, that simply is not good. If you look at a cyclist, pro tour cyclist, he'll go with 30 kilometers an hour in training and 50 kilometers in racing. So there must be a bigger gap between training pace and racing pace.
So you really feel you put the sides where you go a bit slower and then you push yourself harder. I think most of us enjoy maybe riding somewhere in the middle, because that's kind of the comfort zone. But if you really want to get better, you train with the swimmers. Would you recommend this? Did you say go swimming with the swimmers, go cycling with the cyclists, go running with the runners, or?
I would always recommend to look at what the specialists do. Do not train with them all the time, because they have to do something different. Otherwise, they would all be triathletes. But it makes sense, of course, to look into what the specialists are doing and to consider what's useful for you out of that training.
Any other favorite races you had, destinations you've been, where you can say, listen, if you plan for an event, you've been in Lanzarote, you've been all around the world doing triathlons, is there any place and any memory which was really fond?
Well, I liked the race in St. Croix a lot. It used to be kind of the season opening for the Northern American athletes. It was like little Hawaii. I enjoyed that. But there are so many, and especially we're blessed back home in Germany because there are so many well conducted and good organized races. So yeah, can't complain about that. I had fun at experimental races like Sri Lanka as well. It was a little crazy, but was fun as well. So I think generally most triathlon races are held at exciting destinations, and so whenever you have the chance to go somewhere that's beautiful, and then you race, and maybe you can combine it with a holiday. So as I said, back home, yeah, a few nice races, but I hardly know many bad places or bad races that I've done.
Have you followed 2019, the Ironman, in the last years in Hawaii? Is this something you have seen? Will you think the future, any athletes you see coming up, which we haven't maybe seen yet, and you see some talent coming that way, or do you expect to be dominant in the next years?
Well, I think that Braden Curry and Patrick Nielsen are very interesting athletes with a lot of talent. I don't know how they develop, and you know, we have so many good triathletes on short course and you know all around at the scene. So that with them, it's simply whether they are able to put the time in to develop into those great athletes that and have those great performances that we'd like to see. But at the moment, these two are probably the ones that you know would be my favorites for the future.
We want to open maybe the floor as well for some questions. So we want to give enough time that you can ask Faris all the questions. That we ask any questions we shouldn't ask, and nothing is off topic. So you can just we have a microphone. We upgraded our system, so we have now.
Thank you for sharing with us all this very nice information, especially that we have to enjoy. That's what I tell my children. One question, is there any Ironman that you would have liked to do and you couldn't do, or you didn't have the opportunity?
Japan. I tried to get in contact back in the day with the organizer, but it didn't work out for some reason I cannot explain, but that just didn't happen. And of course there are plenty of races that I would like to win, and I could win, but that's my legs, nothing else's fault.
Hi Faris, good to see you again. I have bumped into you in many races, Austria, South Africa. They have rock marathon here, the half marathon, the White Creek Marathon long ago. So anyways, just a question. Chris McCormack mentioned in his book, Here to Win, that there was some sort of friction between the two of you. Did you guys ever overcame this rivalry or friction, and you became friends, or you never?
No.
Sorry.
No. And I don't want to go any further into detail, but no.
You mentioned before that you're going to Tokyo with the national team, so Olympic Games. I think that must be an unbelievable place to go when you have your athletes ready. And any exciting things you're looking forward to Tokyo?
Well, of course, I mean it's the Olympic Games, so I'm excited just to think about it. And I was there last year for the test event, and that was already pretty cool. And yeah, I think the German Federation was pretty down in 2016. A lot of issues with qualification and so on. So it almost seemed like it's no longer the federation that brought out Jan Frodeno and those Daniel Unger and all those good guys. And we're slowly trying to turn it around. And thank God now we have qualified the relay, and 2 of our athletes are already qualified, and we are going to qualify 2 more. So that is good. So the development is good. And I mean, last year the team was second at the European Championships, second at the World Championships. So you know, it's coming along, and I'm looking forward to see them race next week when the very best of the best will race. The field is more stacked than it will be in Tokyo, in Abu Dhabi, and I can't wait to see our relay perform there.
So I met your son today, and he's still small, but if he comes one day and said, "Daddy, I want to be a pro triathlete," you would say, "Go for it"?
Oh well, of course. I mean, I would support him, but I often have these issues as well that you can't do triathlon for daddy. This is not happening. If you ever try that, and I mean, I've seen that along during my career where the parents want the children so badly to become professional athletes, whether it was in swimming or in triathlon, and that most often doesn't work out. And I'd rather see my son doing no sports at all and being happy than me forcing him to become something that he doesn't like to be.
Hi, Faris. I have two questions. First one, how did you see triathlon as a triathlete, and how did you see it as a coach? What's the difference? The second question, how did it feel coaching the world champion?
Okay, I answer the second question first. I have to clarify that I didn't start my coaching experience because I thought that this is something I'm obliged to do, and I simply needed an excuse for being still in the scene, and could possibly fly somewhere and sell that to my wife. Because if you go there with no reason, then it's pretty hard. So the whole coaching story came along as it's kind of a hobby, and then Patrick all of a sudden developed so well. So that was kind of a positive accident, you could call it. And obviously I was very happy with it, and I mentioned it today already in a conversation that after I retired, I thought, okay, this is it. I've had a great career, and now I'm retired, and I start feeding the doves or do whatever. And then I was on a German TV show. Then I got a sponsorship contract when I was retired, which I found pretty cool. And then Patrick came along, and all of a sudden, I was the coach of a 2-time world champion, and now I'm the head coach of the German Federation. So, we're like, okay, I'll take that. And looking at triathlon as a triathlete or as a coach, I think as a coach, you're a bit more relaxed, or at least I am more relaxed. Many things that I see now, like, for example, there's always that discussion, okay, we have the 140th 70.3 race in the world, and there's no real competition, and the winner is not a real pro, and whatever. And I also had that today, but also a couple of weeks ago when I met with Nielsen and his coach. And I was like, dude, I don't care if the winner at 70.3 Mongolia needs 5 hours to win that thing. I don't care if his athletic performance isn't so good, because the only thing I care about is there are 2,000 Mongolians now that do triathlon, and they enjoy it. So that's good for me, because I'm living in the triathlon world. And I'd rather see another 500 70.3s all over the world in every village, and have people enjoy triathlon and do it, than keeping it small and have all those great athletes at 1 or 2 races, which is great to watch them, but we haven't grown the sport. And so, this is what I understand much better now, standing on the outside, than I was when I was on the inside. And also, the discussions about WTC, greedy, and don't pay their pros and whatever. Well, if they provide the stage, they can keep the appearance fee. I need the stage, and if the stage is perfect, then it's good enough. Then I bring the sponsors in, then I have something to sell. And all those things you understand much better when you're on the sideline than when you're in it. Because when you're in it, okay, you raise for money, and it's a very self-centered sport. So these are things that you might understand much better when you're on the outside.
Well, hi Faris, thank you very much for coming today. I'm personally super excited to be here and finally have the opportunity to meet you in person. I brought a little goodie as well that I would like you to see after the meeting.
Sure.
Actually, my question that I had is partially already answered, like how you made that split, that transition from becoming a successful athlete to also being a successful coach, which doesn't actually happen. You can be a super successful athlete and you can just totally be zero as a coach and just totally fail. And do you think that you have personally like developed your knowledge about triathlon, about how things are being done, and like developing that sport further into like state of art sport? And do you see yourself coaching like future world champions? Like single, like as a coach of single athletes?
Well, that's a pretty hard question, the last one, because I'm coaching 2 athletes at the moment, and I don't know how. One of them probably won't be a world champion. I don't know how the other one will develop. But that was never my intention. So the intention was always to try to improve them. And I personally think the best coach is not the one that has one world champion and all his other athletes failed, but the one that, you know, squeezes out the very best performance out of each and every one of his athletes. And that might be with one athlete, that athlete is able to run 10 kilometers at any pace. And with the other guy, it might be the club championship. And with the next one, you need to be whatever, world champion. And another one so has this and that goal. So, but I think that a coach's goal must be to get the most out of each and every athlete. And then, of course, personally, I have developed, especially in the last 1.5 years with the federation, I learned a lot, not only about the sport itself, but also how sport in Germany, the whole government-funded sport works. Yeah, so I have developed myself as well. And most of the coaching advice that I give, obviously, is based on what I've experienced myself. And the hardest part for me, but what I already realized when I was still an athlete, first I thought that every triathlete thinks the same way that I do, because simply we do the same sport, which is not the case. And that was interesting for me to understand in the beginning, because to me, okay, we are all professional triathletes, so we all think the same, but no, we don't, and not everybody works the same way, develops well under the same training program and all that. And yeah, as I said, I learned a lot in the last 1.5 years and developed in every aspect.
Do you think, now being a successful coach and having driven to Patrick Lange to 2 times world champion, do you think you can with that knowledge that you have reached now, and like your personal development, that you can lead and guide like potential candidates to that step, like to make them become a lot, like you say, get the best out of them, but do you think you can take a little bit more?
Well, one thing is for sure, no coach in the world you can turn a donkey into a racehorse. That's not happening, you know. You can't turn a donkey into a fast donkey, but this is where it ends. And if you have a guy like Patrick, he simply is very, very gifted, obviously with his very efficient run style, and then with his very, very good aerodynamics on the bike. So this is something that you do not coach. This is something that is given. And of course, efficiency on the run is to some degree coachable, but only to some degree. And you know, it's like talent is a very difficult term, because you can basically work on everything, but you cannot work on everything at the same time, you know? So the less you have to work on, the more talented you more or less are. And some people respond very well to training and others do not. And as I said, there are barriers that you simply cannot, cannot overcome. And I'm definitely not the right coach for everyone, that's for sure. I don't think anyone is. And a lot is happening in the brain. And with some people click and it works, and with some people it doesn't. and it's the same training program. So, it's not that easy. I've learned that as well.
What is your motivation? So obviously your inspiration to do the sport for so many years at such a high level, and obviously during every event, at least for most of the people, you come to that point where you say, listen, why am I doing this? So when you're in the run and you're like 30 kilometers into the run, so what did you tell yourself when you were at that dark spot and you thought, okay, Faris, let's go? What is it? What goes to your mind, and how do you manage to stay on top of your game for so many years?
Well, obviously I had 3 very good years, 2004, 5, and 6, and then I had a little dip where I did a lot of mistakes, especially positioning-wise on the bike, and simply stuff that small errors that add up, small mistakes that add up. The motivation was always to be as good as I could and to perform as good as I could, and it becomes easier with the years and with the experience that you have. You know, usually at your first Ironman, the Ironman itself is very long, and the dark periods get very long, and you have a lot of discussions, you know, like, what am I doing here with yourself? And the more experience you have, the shorter usually the whole race gets, and the dark periods get very short. And so you simply have much more routine. So to me, it was hard to go really, really hard, but not to actually make it. And that is a problem, you know, and I didn't have the golden formula, otherwise I probably would have been more successful, what I can tell myself through the races. But I simply liked to perform as good as I could, and usually putting on the race number was mostly enough, and I didn't have to tell myself anything very special.
Hi, thank you, Faris. I was speaking with a friend a few years ago, and we were talking about sleeping and recovery, and he said he heard you speaking, and I can't remember the number, but it was an outrageous amount of sleeping. Is that true or not true?
Well, outrageous. I mean, usually you try to sleep 8 to 9 hours during the night, and then you nap every afternoon, and that was what I did. I mean, especially when I was here in the UAE, the life was getting up at 6:30, 7:30 you were on the bike, then you ride between 3 and 6 hours, depending on the program. Then I do a transition run, then lunch, shower, lunch, sleep, have tea and whatever, muffin, and then you go to the gym and to the pool, and that was the basic routine. And then you'd leave the pool and you'd go for dinner, shopping, bed, and shopping for groceries, you know, not for clothing. And that was it. So you would sleep around 9.5 hours a day, at least. That's normal, but not like 50. One of my friends once slept 14 hours a day. That was when we were training at altitude, and he was overtrained massively. I mean, the guy was dead. So yeah, but then you know something's wrong with you.
I remember one episode when you came from Elaine after a training camp, like out 7-8 days. You had like 5 or 6 or 7 athletes with you, and then we did a Friday morning ride, and then we went for brunch, and we had a good deal in Porsche Arab, so we went to the Al-Maha brunch, and I think the waiters there, they have never seen a group of people eating so much. Yeah, they were like again and again, and I think one of them had 13 plates of food, and it was just like they came and cleaned the table, and again new cutlery, and I think it looked like they had eaten for a week.
Yeah, I mean, when you're young and you train that much. Today I couldn't eat that much anymore, even if I would train more. But of course, you know, we'd have. Of course, we wouldn't eat all that. But 2 guys, we would cook 1 kilogram of pasta for lunch, and we'd eat probably 2/3 of it. Yeah.
So if you have the coach team now for the DTU, do you do some mental training, mental coaching with them, or you have a special training for these things?
Well, first of all, I'm called the head coach, but I do not coach directly. It's more like a management position that I have with the federation. So I do not tell any athlete tomorrow you have to run 10 times 800 meters or whatsoever. So I'm more, it's like managing, and my main responsibility is the composition of the team, of the relay. Of course there's other stuff to do, but this is like the main thing. Of course there is mental coaches that are available. Some athletes use that, many others don't. So that's always a personal decision of the athlete, and the federation can only provide that, but we cannot provide it. Well, it doesn't make much sense to have like a federation mental coach when the athletes are distributed all over and they cannot see that person and cannot build up a trust relationship to that very person. Then it doesn't make any sense.
Who do you think for yourself is the inspiration? Who is the biggest triathlete you feel? Is there one person particular sticks out where you say, okay, that was my inspiration as a young athlete, or somebody you really think, okay, if I'm thinking triathlon, that's the person?
Well, my inspiration was Thomas Helleregen. That was kind of the guy, and I liked his style of racing. I liked the no-nonsense approach, tough, and you know, he was simply training a lot and training like crazy, and but on the other hand, you know, being very grounded, and still to this day, he's a pretty simple guy, and you know, no nonsense. So if we talk about my inspiration, if we talk about the best triathlete, I think there's no question about it. I mean, this is Jan Frodeno, and there's nobody else. You know, that's pretty simple. I mean, nobody has been even close from a success standpoint than he is. So no, that's pretty easy.
Yes.
Thank you so much for giving us the chance to meet you in person. I'm really also excited to meet you here. I have a question for people like me, for example. I have a corporate job. I have some time to travel. I have a family. I have kids. What would you advise people like us who love the triathlons in terms of training? What kind of things that we should always keep in mind to keep us motivated? In terms of swim, bike, run, if you would like to miss one of these, what would be the one that you can?
Don't say bike. Don't say bike.
But obviously, if you have time constraints, then it's always what has the most effect, and that's running. So it's because it takes the least time to be anywhere close to have some effect on it. That's why most guys that have a rather full schedule run a lot, and usually they only cycle on the weekends. This is the easiest, you know. And if you have to travel, of course, that's always the same. The first thing that you drop is swimming, because where's the pool? How do I get to the pool? And you know, for an hour of swimming, you need at least 2 hours to get there, get dressed, and so on. With running, it's walk out of the door and training starts. So that said, obviously, if you want to do triathlon, at some point you have to swim and to cycle, otherwise it doesn't work. And also it depends on the distance, you know. From scratch, I cannot construct a training program, but you know, depending on the hours that you have, usually running will be overstressed the less time you have. And motivation, I mean, you have to sign up for a race to keep you motivated. Even I have to do that. You know, I signed up for a race as well in September, just to keep me on track, and I really love to do triathlon and to exercise, but when you have a race coming up, it's always something totally different.
Out of these three disciplines, which one is your favorite? What's the most disliked one? The one most?
I have a swimming background, as I said, but it's, you know, I love everything. That's the problem now for me since I'm retired. Many guys have something that they really don't like, so they don't touch the pool anymore, or they sold their bikes, or they have problems with the knees or the ankles or whatever, and they don't run anymore. I have friends like that. They have clearly said, okay, this is something that I don't do anymore, or they don't go to the gym anymore. My problem is that I love everything, and so I end up doing everything, and probably I should focus a little, but I can't.
Thank you.
For which race did you sign up in September?
Just a swim run. It's a swim run in Italy. It's a 3-hour race. It's a single event, not a team event, not like Untitled, and it's just, as I said, it's a 3-hour race, so it's quite doable. And
No pressure, but we're all gonna watch you.
it's called the Aquatic Runner, and I did it twice, and it's a rather nice race. And
But to Wolfi's point, you gave up the bike, right?
It's coming on Friday morning, so if you want to check the performance against a former world champion, you can come Friday morning, 6:30. He will be there and competing, 80 kilometer.
we didn't use FTP back in the day, but approximately around 350, 360 watts. I did up the Jebel, which is just half an hour from bridge. I did 377 on my best performance with 70.1 kilograms.
Yes. So my question is about your training schedule before and now after. So at the peak of your career, how many hours would you spend training?
On the peak of my career, of course, that changed rapidly. I had up to 45 hours when I was in the UAE and doing a lot of base work, where I simply cycled a lot, easy miles, and that came down a bit with the years because you don't need that much anymore. And nowadays, when I'm back home and working, I try to do every day one thing. Sometimes I do 2 sessions still, but it's like a 3K swim in the morning and 40 minutes in the gym in the afternoon, and it's a 10K run or 11K run in the morning, and maybe an hour on the treadmill, on the turbo in the afternoon. So maybe 14 hours a week, but I'm missing out on those long sessions. I try here to get in a few miles on the bike and get those long sessions in, because you need those long sessions to build up the mitochondria in the muscle, and you simply have to have that whenever you do long endurance stuff.
So, do you train with the national team, or you just tell them what to do?
Sometimes I cycle. Last year I cycled with the guys, but I do not run with them. Well, maybe on a rather slow run, but hardly. When I'm with them in training camp, and last year, for example, in South Africa, I cycled with the girls.
What's your opinion on the math training? Math training. Math. Yeah, marathon.
I don't even.
The low heart rate training.
Low heart rate training. Well, low heart rate training is more or less what I did most of the time. And you do base miles. That's why the Emirates, the UAE, is so great for. So.
But how low is low?
100 with me, 100 to 110.
But you're a pro, like someone who's an 80 grouper. How low is it?
I can't tell you that because not everybody is the same. I have athletes that do base runs with 160, 150 beats per minute. I have athletes that do a base run, both same speed, let's say for 30, with 125. So even amongst my guys, the differences are huge. Some things are just genetically.
Okay, but it's not like a big deal if you have a high heart rate on the base run.
High depends on you personally, and what you shouldn't do is you shouldn't train too hard base, because then you don't build up your base, then you do something else. And if you really want to know where you are supposed to train, then you do a lag test, incremental test with the steps, just the usual thing, every 3 minutes, speed increases, it's on the turbo, and then you put up the wattage, or on the treadmill, then you put up the speed. And then you can see in which areas you're supposed to be training for base. And that's an issue, because you can see almost at the leg test whether you train too hard, for example, at base. And basically, the whole idea is that you train a lot of volume, rather slow, in order to build up that aerobic engine. In very simple terms. No?
You spoke about gym sessions, so you said you would have added more gym sessions to your training if you would have known more, or you would have wanted more squats. Do you train more upper body? But if you say a general gym session, how should it look like for a triathlete to build some strength? Would you be upper body and lower body the same amount, or is there anything you would have learned now over the years?
Well, obviously that's also a question that is very general, and it's very individual, because there are athletes you don't want to do any strength training with them because for some reason they already have a lot of strength and you don't want to emphasize it. Generally, everybody should do a little bit, but if we have, for example, a guy here that has time constraints, and you have, let's say, 8 hours a week, if the gentleman over there does 3 hours per week gym training, then we don't have any time for endurance left. What do? Same when came up with core. You gotta do core. Core here, core there, core everywhere. You gotta do core all the time. Yeah. But when you have 6 hours a week, you can't do 3 hours of core. That doesn't work, because then you...
30 minutes per week.
30 minutes per week is very little. That's
core training. You mean core training? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'd rather say that before a swim session, for example, you do some core exercises, put them in, and that can last 10-15 minutes, and then that's it. There is no time for a proper gym session. With Patrick, for example, the things that we changed in his training was that he started doing gym work during the whole year on a very regular basis. Sometimes we had him do 4 gym sessions a week, which is a lot for a triathlete, and more just transition runs. These were the basic things that we changed, and of course a little more cycling volume, but no magic hands or secrets or golden powder or whatever, but just the basics, you know. And sometimes, obviously, an increase in volume has a huge impact, and then simply a change of almost anything has a huge impact, because not because the old thing was wrong and the new thing's right, but simply because you changed something. And you have to always find new ways to make the body adapt. And just imagine if you're a young Frodeno and you cannot put more volume on that guy. That has already been done for the last 5 to 10 years. You have to come up with a new plan, and then you have to throw overboard everything that you know in order just to change something. But for example, with most of the guys that I have on the national team, they are so far away from the maximum volume that could be done. So this is the safest solution. Okay, we increase the volume 10% next year, and we're good to go. We'll have an improvement.
I just wanted to say something to our triathlon friend on the right-hand side about motivation and what keeps you motivated as an amateur, just like a hobby triathlete, which I am myself as well. I think, okay, take it from the fun side. As soon as you start growing your belly, I think you've got to think about like getting your training volume a little bit up. Second of all, I think we have the most amazing countryside here in the UAE. We have the uber luxury that our blessed ruler gave us numerous kilometers of beautiful cycling paths, which we regularly abuse. And to see the sunrise here in the morning you like kind of kick your butt in the morning at 4 o'clock, get out when it's dark, and then just be on the bike and see the sunrise here, cycle out in the desert, see the oryx. It's very quiet. You hear your blood pump in your ears, and I think this is something. If this doesn't motivate you to get up and move your butt, I think I don't know what else you're looking for. We've got beautiful beaches here. We've got swimming pools everywhere. We're so uber spoiled here with facilities that we can use. We have Wolfi's bike shops. That really
Yes, thank you.
Literally, that reads every wish of my eyes. What I want. I couldn't ask for anything better. Like any better training conditions and motivation. Yeah, if you love to race, I would consider myself to be a training donkey rather than a race hazard. I think that's motivation enough. Just get out, also meet your buddies on the way. There's, I don't know how many, around 2,000 triathletes in the UAE itself, more or less active on the scene. But it's just such an awesome community here that I can just recommend. Get your butt up in the morning, go out and train, and have some fun.
That's it. Good work. Yeah, very good. Any other questions? Anything?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
First of all, thanks to be here, Faris. Maybe you don't recognize me. I done some session with you in the Dunderbutt in Munich. Long time ago, maybe. I didn't have my tattoos at this time, so that's why. My question is just, you see all the new technology. You see the heart rate monitor. You see the watt. Do you not think, okay guys, put it away once a week, just listen to your body, think about it, how many beats you really run, just think about it, what is your heartbeat without, think about it, how much you think you fast you are, but don't use it. I mean, Daniela Riff is a good thing. I mean, she is doing the competition without watch. So do you think it's maybe a good thing to do it once a week, listen to your body, get used to your body, because everything else may make you nervous and too crazy?
Well, all the gadgets that you have, whether it's the power meter or the watch, these are tools. They're supposed to support you and help you. They're not supposed to make you crazy about it. And I think that, you know, I have a fairly good knowledge of my body and know pretty good what's happening. Not everybody has that, especially in the beginning. Not everybody knows how it's supposed to feel. But in this point, I share with Brad Sutton, who basically says the same, that guys, you know, at some point you have to do it. Just do it. And triathletes, generally speaking, triathletes are experts on the last 5 to 10% of training, and 95% of the training is just do it. It's boring base work, more or less boring. And I do not consider it boring at all, but sometimes it seems to be to some people. And this is what the sport basically about. You know, you have to do it. And sometimes you want to tell people, you know what, just go into the forest and run for an hour. And that's it, you know, just run. Easy, and be alone with yourself and be content with yourself, and don't have anything else. That said, you know, the equipment is there to help you, especially to guide you a little bit in the beginning and to get to know your body. You know, later on you should know when I run 130 beats per minute, how that feels like. So I think it's an advantage to have all those gadgets nowadays, but in the end, of course, you have to use them and you have to make the decisions, and not the watch should make the decisions for you.
I remember when you were riding that you sometimes covered the SRM unit and just to go by feel instead of going by the power meter. And I think sometimes it's, I shouldn't say that, but sometimes to leave your Garmin or your design or whatever at home and just go out and ride your bike with your buddies, I think that's really revealing, and it's just nice to have a good ride and not to be kind of restricted by the numbers, and so you covered, I remember you covered the numbers, and then you did a race, and then later you check your data and really see how far can you push, because if you push maybe 350 watts and you think, oh, I can't go further, but maybe on that day you can go 380 or 377 up to jugular feet, and if you're just afraid to push that far, maybe you will never reach your full potential.
And it can be deceiving. To give you an example, I did a race in Koh Samui a couple of years ago, and usually I'm able to put out between 280 and 290 watts on an Ironman. So it was in Koh Samui, it was 120k bike ride, or 125 or something. So the wattage should be higher. It's a third less of the distance, so wattage should be higher. But with 90% humidity and 35 degrees outside, I had one of the fastest bike splits, and I rode 250 watts. So if you look at your power meter and you see 250 watts, you're like, oh, I have a really bad day. You throw away the bike and you stop, which doesn't make any sense at all. And the fastest bike split, by the way, was the one of Mario van Honacker that day, and he had 255. So, you know, sometimes it's deceiving, and you still have to know your body and do what you're supposed to be doing, and make the decisions.
Thanks, Faris. My question is kind of relates to what we discussed before on the low heart rate training and a lot of base training done there. What would you say to an age group who says something like, if you don't go fast in training, you don't go fast in a race? So if you have to run, not currently names, but if say you have to run a half marathon, how would you race? Like, how would you do it in a race? You have to do it the same way in training. So if you don't go hard in training, you don't go fast in a race. What would you say to that?
Well, I mean, that is to some degree, of course, that is true. But the problem is, especially when you train women, they increase the volume by 30% of what's on the training schedule. Then they increase the speed a little bit, and then once we come to the hard sessions, they can't do it anymore at the prescribed intensity. And there is the problem. And usually, if you design a training program, there is certain efforts that have to be done at certain times. And if you're so tired that you cannot do them anymore, then something's wrong. And believe me, that goes through from age groupers to pros alike. And that doesn't make any sense at all. If you're too tired to do the hard efforts, then you're not fast enough. That doesn't mean that if you run, for example, you prepare for a half marathon, you run, let's say, 60 kilometers a week, that you run all those 60 kilometers at race pace. That doesn't make any sense at all. That's just nonsense, you know. And you have to balance it out. And there is, of course, coaching philosophy that says, how do you do more volume and slower pace, or a little bit less volume and higher pace? That depends on what type of athlete you are, you know, how you function. That is the art of training, the art of coaching. So, but some things are physiology. That is, there's no philosophy included in that. That is just simple physiology. And so, and some other things are like, you know, a little more philosophic. But this is what it's all about, you know. And usually, as a triathlete, rule of thumb, every week you have one hard session per discipline. That worked pretty well. Yeah, so, as I said, as a rule of thumb.
Faris, how's it? Just with, in terms of training, here we've obviously got summer. A lot of us can't be out in the heat. What's your take on treadmill running, indoor biking? I know there's been quite a big push, a lot of social media of the triathletes pushing towards indoors. What's your take on the indoor training scene?
Well, the problem is that if you only train indoors, you don't know how to ride a bike. That's the problem. And if you have a course like Kona, no problem. That's easy. 100k this way, turn around, come back. So if you have a rather demanding technical course, that might kill you, literally, because there's a corner and you go straight. So there should be some balance. Obviously, I mean, the treadmill makes it much easier. You hop on and you do your stuff, and I recommend that usually for the German winter, for example, to do kind of sessions with treadmill and turbo trainer to preserve the triathlon feeling, to prolong the session, because I mean, who wants to do a 3-hour session on a turbo? And in order to get long sessions in. So of course that helps. That is, as the power meter or the heart rate monitor, that's a tool. And the more you stress it, the less you learn how to handle your bike. I think yesterday, I don't know his first name, but Monty was here. I mean, there you can see bike control, what that guy can do. And what is possible with a bike, and obviously, I mean, that's for the very chosen few, but you have to know how to steer your bike, and it gets dangerous. Every year when I do the Wolfi ride, there are some riders that I see that I'm like, ooh, I don't want to ride behind that guy because it's dangerous.
Any more questions? Any things?
Don't be shy. I have heard them all, and usually one of the favorite topics is nutrition. We haven't touched that one, and I know it's a very, very controversial topic, for example. But please, I'm here to answer all your questions, so feel free. And yeah, I'm happy. I don't want to force you to, but I want to give you the opportunity. Don't be shy.
Should we go keto then?
Question about injuries. Did you have any major injuries during your career? And if you did, how did you get through that period? It can be quite a difficult period when you can't train and all these things.
I was pretty blessed. I had one or the other crash that I was never really badly, and then one stress fracture in the hip, and simply waited till it was gone. So no, I don't have a long rehab career so I was always a bit cautious with the running. So in my early years, when I was very young, I ran a lot. But later on in my career, I averaged about 60-65 kilometers a week, which is nothing, on international top pro level. But I'd rather do more cycling. I'd rather do that also with my athletes. I'd rather have them cycle 3 hours a week more than an hour of running more.
Just a question again. This was all a good question. Now I have a bad question for you. Are you wearing a helmet now in the training, or still without helmet? And why not?
I was simply so used to not riding without a helmet that if I'm on my own, I don't ride with a helmet. But which is stupid, no question about it. So I'm simply was not used to it, and I never liked it. I remember that Wolfi once said to me, "Faris, can you do me a favor and wear a helmet when you ride with us?" And I said, "Okay, Wolfi, if you are so nicely, I can't say no." And if I'm with the federation, obviously I'm obliged to ride with a helmet. And nowadays I'm pretty happy that the kids are so used to it that there's no question for them. Yeah, as I said, I'm simply not used to it. I don't like it. And when I go mountain biking, for example, I always wear a helmet because it's simply dangerous. But on the road, I cycled so many kilometers, and especially also here in the UAE, that's never happened. And you're like, but as I said, it's stupid. No question about it.
So it's not a promise yet?
No.
Okay.
But I remember you had a quick excursus into mountain biking, as you mentioned. You did Cape Epic, so you did it in which year? In
2009.
Okay, and how would you compare, let's say, a stage race like the Cape Epic compared to an Ironman in Hawaii? How is the experience?
Completely different. I mean, Cape Epic is a great experience. I mean, every endurance lover should try to get in and do it. It was just simply great. I was led to my technical borders, of how good I'm able to ride a mountain bike, to handle a bike. But it was a great experience, and I can truly recommend it for everyone to go out and try. And it's hard because at an Ironman race you have that 1 day thing. Of course, afterwards you're spent, and then it builds up, and you have many guys that are able to ride quite solid for 3 days, and then they crumble to pieces. And so it's a different thing. Simply, it's a different thing.
Hi, Faris. I have two questions. Since you mentioned about the nutrition, do you know any professional athletes who is able to perform exceedingly well by being on a vegetarian diet, by avoiding eating meat, for example? And the second question, when it comes to the trainings and the competition against the top athletes, and how did you overcome the challenge when you mentally prepare yourself that you're capable of doing this distance, for example, and this effort? Did you have a team or friends who were encouraging you to believe yourself, or you just were able to cope yourself? Thank you.
So first of all, Patrick Lange is a vegetarian, not a pretty strict one. He would eat meat from time to time, occasionally, but basically he's vegetarian. And vegetarian simply means that you have to take care more of your nutrition and probably check your blood more often than another athlete. But that's basically it. And nowadays, with all the supplements that you can get, it adds more work to it. And then the other thing, I never needed anyone to encourage me to do it. Myself was enough, and I wanted to do triathlon, and long distances were never an issue for me. So I liked that a lot, and even when I was a swimmer, I enjoyed the boring, long, like 30 times 100 meters sessions much more than anything more playful.
But you challenge yourself? Is it just something you like to compete and then see the guy in front of you and you say, listen, I'm gonna beat you? And if you're in the pool, you feel like, okay, you want to beat the next time. So what's just like kind of the motivation to go faster and say, okay, I did 1 minute and now I do 59 seconds?
Of course, the time, and especially with the running, it was difficult for me from the very beginning to push myself that hard. So I knew that I needed other people around, and I needed a training group. And I'm in a running group to this day for more than 20 years now. And so that was necessary, but to push that extra little bit. On the bike, it never felt so hard, so I could do short efforts and on the treadmill or so.
Are you still in contact with Pete Jacobs?
No. Pete is a very special person, and I share very little of his beliefs, but he was a world champion, that he deserves respect for that, and he had a very different approach to the whole thing than I had. That said, some things were amazing. He would go to the pool, sip some water, and then, okay, today let's okay. And
he's eating only meat. I listened to him.
Yeah, but he was on a different thing before, and it's, as I said, I don't share many of those beliefs. But as I said, he was a special athlete, and he would swim 3 to 4 times a week, maybe 3 to 4 kilometers max, and then he would, put out 1 or 2 series where he would think that this is impossible with that type of training. And also his running, he was very, very technique orientated, and totally different approach, rather crazy, but it worked.
You won the Ironman Hawaii in
12.
2:12. Okay. Any more?
I've got one more. Faris, do you think, I know you minimalistic, everyone's commented on you arriving at the airport with just a bike box with all your clothes in. Do you think that the triathlon scene is seen as being overcomplicated? Do you think people are overcomplicating their training and taking things to the way to where they should actually just be, like you said, having fun?
A little bit, yes. I mean, if you have an issue with the ripeness of your banana, you know, then you come to a certain point, you know, and the interesting thing is that pros are usually way less complicated and stressing around the minor stuff than some of the age groupers, and I know what I'm talking about because from time to time I do training camps with the age groupers on the Canary Islands, and you know, you sometimes you're like, dude, seriously? I mean, this is that. Why does that question even come up? You know, but yeah, people tend to think way too much about it and don't stay with the basics.
So did you tell your age group is the same thing you told Patrick Langer when you first met him, that he had no talent?
Oh, that would be unfair because most of the guys, obviously, there are some. When I do those training camps, then there's from all ranges. You know, you have people that barely know how to ride a bike, from people that try to, try, but I mean they're pretty close to the qualification for Kona, so they know to serious degree what they're doing, and so to tell somebody that is 120 kilograms that he has no talent to qualify, yeah, that's obvious. I don't have to do that. That won't work next year. If he's working on it with a longer time frame, then that works, or that can work. So it's a completely different story, you know. And with Patrick, it was I couldn't believe that he could run that fast. You know, I mean, everybody could see that he was running fast, but not that fast. And I couldn't estimate the aerodynamic position that he could really hold on the bike. That was something that I couldn't see in the beginning.
I just want to mention as well that before Faris came here today, he was with Marcus from Inner Fight, and I think you have a podcast coming out in the next couple of weeks. So if you don't follow Inner Fight podcast, I think it's a really, really interesting 610 episodes now. So I think it's a nice podcast to follow, and you will be on there in the next couple of weeks. So sign up for that.
But I think most of the guys have heard
yes.
what I've said there.
You want to relive it again?
There isn't so much difference.
Yes. So, and again, from my side, thank you so much. I think it has been a pleasure. I think you're a very humble person, and you're an absolute legend in the sport. And it's amazing how you can be a world champion and then just take it easy, European champion. So, Faris, thank you very much for taking the time, and I really appreciate it.
You're most welcome. You're most welcome. Thank you very much.
I think if you want to take some pictures, I think we have some bikes to sign, and any other questions so far as is around. And yeah, thank you very much.
Yes.
Good.
Was you going to say something?
Yeah.
It's live. So
It's live.
Thank you for.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for everyone listening and watching us. I think it was just amazing, and we're going to do some more Wolfi talks in the future. So just keep on following us. Thank you.